Hello, I'm Professor Thomas Leek. Welcome to First Year Latin, with an emphasis on Latin and academic disciplines. In this course, you'll be learning, well, Latin. But Latin is a language with an extraordinary and extraordinarily long history. Latin literacy stretches back to the 7th or 8th century BC and extends up to today. With that long of a history, where should we start? Well, I would propose that we start with popular perception. Sometimes you'll hear a person say that Latin is a dead language, but that's not quite correct. Ancient Hittite, that's a dead language. The Hittites were a group mentioned, for instance, in the Old Testament and in other documents, and they ran this empire in Asia Minor over 3,000 years ago. You can see it. This is all it right there. There are some writings left over that we can study, but nobody actively uses Hittite for any purpose other than studying Hittite language and Hittite culture and, of course, its related cultures and languages. But Latin is still actively used in the 21st century, if not as a mother tongue, but at least for various, if limited, purposes. And it's, again, right up to this day. This is rather exceptional in linguistic history. Among ancient languages, probably only Hebrew, as a language that was resurrected for use as a mother tongue in modern Israel, has an equally exceptional history. Additionally, ancient Hittite, it's not just dead. It has left no children to survive it. Latin, on the other hand, has left us the Romance languages like French. I think we should all know these, French. And also not just French, but I don't want to call them French dialects because speakers of these languages would get upset with me, but not even variations on French, but let's say Romance languages spoken in France, like Occitan. Same thing goes with Spanish, by the way. In Spain, you will also find speakers of Catalan. And of course, there are many other Romance languages like Italian, of course, or Romanian. These are all Romance languages that are in effect modern Latin. And of course, Catalan and Occitan are no less legitimate than let's call them the political state languages of France and Spain. Also, Latin has heavily influenced English, which is from a different language family. These are the Romance languages here. They're also close by in Northern Europe, the Germanic languages. I'll have to write this off to the side here, but English is a Germanic language with heavy influence from outside its family group. In case you need me to tell you, German is also a Germanic language, as is Dutch, and these have all been fairly heavily influenced by Latin, by French too, which is to say by modern Latin. Also, the Catholic Church still uses a lot of Latin. I'm told that at the Vatican, you can still use an ATM in Latin if you so choose, though I have yet to experience that. Next time I'm there, it's something I'm going to go find, but maybe you should take that with a grain of salt since I haven't seen them myself. The Pope's encyclicals also are all written in Latin, and in fact, up until recently, a fellow named Father Reginald Foster from Milwaukee was the Latin secretary of the Pope. Besides being well known as a Latinist, he also appeared in Bill Mayer's film Religulous, if that interests you. He's back in Milwaukee now. He had to retire, but I'll include the link to that film, or that section of the film, if that interests you. So, Latin has left an impression also, as I said, on English, and through various channels. For instance, through the Academy, which is something we'll be focusing on here, and you see this very often in academic languages. So, language like say with university mottos. UWSP's motto happens to be in English, which is unfortunate, but UW-Madison's motto, for instance, is what would nowadays probably be seen as violating a church-state barrier. It's Numen Lumen, which is to say, well, I guess that's interpreted as something along the lines of our God is light. There are fewer words here than that, though. Numen is God or divinity. Lumen is light, and this comes up quite a bit in mottos. You have to provide the verb is or est. So, that's a good one. Then there's Harvard's is veritas, just truth. Or UC Berkeley has fiat lux, a great motto, let there be light. And we'll go over, we'll go over these mottos maybe at some other point once we get to the point where we can understand what fiat is. Of course, fiat, by the way, is its own word. That is an order almost. That is a let there be, let it happen, which is kind of an order, right? Also at Harvard, by the way, another interesting academic tradition is that if you ever happen to attend commencement at Harvard, you'll be treated to a Latin oration. It's a graduation speech in Latin. It's a lot of fun, and there's a link to D2L to one of these orations, so go check it out. But nowadays, what's really important is how Latin is used within and alongside the English language. An ancient language like Latin or ancient Greek might have a vocabulary of about 10,000 words. That's a lot, of course, and you probably only really need about 1,500 to know Latin very well. But English has 5 or 6 times that, and if you really try to count every obscure term, you might come up with a number closer to 500,000 English words. Part of the reason for that is that we just have more stuff. The ancient Romans and Greeks, of course, never had smartphones, and for that reason, never needed a word for them. Romans didn't know what a computer is, but interestingly, we use a Latin word to describe those machines. We also have a whole heck of a lot of jargon from Latin, like the quid and quid pro quo, or just phrases like quid pro quo, which is a legal term, having to do with exchange, something for something, or other, status quo, another word, another Latin phrase that you come up against quite often, or habeas corpus is another Latin phrase that you'll read in a newspaper, right? It's quite a common word or phrase. If you want to get to that 500,000 English words number, then you can add all these to kind of inflate that number, even though they're only, they're still Latin. But we've also taken a lot of Latin words and stacked them on top of native words as alternatives with different nuances, right? There's no real replacement for the term habeas corpus. You can only really translate it. But I guess I'd ask you this. In modern English, is there a difference between telling a story and narrating a story? Well, yes, actually, in modern English, there is a difference between these two things. It's a subtle difference. To tell a story implies originality, whereas to narrate a story doesn't necessarily have that implication that it's a story that you are out of yourself, telling out of your own experience. You might just be reading a book out loud to somebody, or reading the script of a film or something like that. But in Latin, the verb of which we have narrate is the verb narrare, which just means to tell a story. It means that. So, by importing the verb narrare, or to narrate, and using that in a slightly different way than what it originally meant, we're able to enrich our vocabulary in that way. So, as you can say, Latin is great for increasing your general vocabulary. Anyway, in this course, we will emphasize those uses of Latin, that is academic Latin, and it's a lot deeper than what I've presented here. This is just a brief introduction. But we'll also learn Latin in the traditional way, using Wheelock's Latin. You should get a hold of the 6th edition, though the 5th edition might be okay too. The 7th edition is out, but I don't own a copy, and I don't want to get one. If you get a different edition than what I've got, you might have to put up with some mismatched page numbers. The good thing about Wheelock's is that it is relatively inexpensive. You should be able to pick up a copy of the 6th edition for $10 or so, not more than 20. Also, Wheelock, for the most part, makes use of Latin adapted from real Latin authors. So almost from the beginning, you are reading more authentic Latin. I will warn you, however, that Wheelock's can seem intimidating at first glance. In the early chapters, you will already learn about the entire case system, for instance, at least the skeleton of it, even if you won't be using much beyond a couple of those cases in the first several chapters. So don't let it frighten you. Everything will come about in good time, and Latin just takes a little bit of patience. So make sure you read the syllabus carefully. You should follow along with the schedule of reading, videos, and quizzes. Then 3 times a week, we need to meet in D2L conferencing to discuss the lectures, leave time for questions, and work on translations together. Latin is a language, and language is a medium for social interaction. That means it's best to learn in a social way, that is, together. Some people can teach themselves Latin through a book, and you're welcome to go at your own pace within certain limits. But most people need some help. I sure did. So it is important for you to take part in the discussion so that I can see how you're doing with the language. So once again, welcome to First Year Latin. I'd like to apologize in advance because I'm doing this video work myself and I have no real experience creating or editing videos. I'm hoping to learn and improve as I go along, but I love Latin and I'm really excited about shaping a course on Latin online. I hope you're just as excited to be learning Latin.